Jeremy from the Tribune was down in Springfield, where they tried to have a late push to get the Bears Stadium moving forward towards Arlington Heights. And Jeremy, it didn't happen. What can you tell us as to why there was no vote? And people are talking about September, perhaps progress could be made then. But where do you think things stand right now? And can people like myself who really, really, really want the Bears to stay in Chicago, can we have any level of celebration that perhaps this is still possible?
Okay, so from the Springfield perspective, to answer your question, I think, for your listeners, you got to look at the dynamics of the state legislature and how it works, okay, to answer your question. So everything is controlled pretty much by Democrats. You have 78 of the 118 House seats are Democrats. 40 of the 59 Senate seats are Democrats. A sizable percentage of the Democratic seats in the House and Senate, not the majority, but like a sizable amounts of the Senate Democrats and the House Democrats are lawmakers from the city of Chicago. In order for anything to pass that's on the Democratic agenda in Springfield, they pretty much need Chicago lawmakers to be on board with most key legislation. It's been expressed to me that it would be a tall order, that if the Bears are trying to move to Arlington Heights, it might be difficult for Chicago lawmakers, all Democrats, to get on board with this because they don't want to vote on something that'll incentivize the Bears to leave the city of Chicago. I mean, to leave their districts, the people who voted them in and voted them into these districts. That being said, in order for anything to get passed, I'll give you an example. In the Illinois House, again, there's 78 Democrats in there. There's an informal rule that the House Speaker, Chris Welch, puts out there that in order for meaningful legislation to get even called to the House floor, he needs to do a roll call behind closed doors to see if he's got at least 60 Democrats who are on board. 60 is a simple majority threshold to pass anything in Springfield during the spring session, which just ended. I don't think that you'd get 60 Democrats for a proposal for state help to move the Bears to Arlington Heights, because there's probably over 20 House Democrats alone, more than that, who are from the city of Chicago. So now the question is, what about Republicans? Would there be suburban Republicans who might be on board to help get to that 60 vote threshold during the spring session? And, there's a possibility that it could. I mean, you could have some suburban state representatives or state senators who might feel like a Bears move to Arlington Heights could help with, economic development in their towns. So I think it'll be really interesting to see. I think that, during veto session coming up in the fall, I believe that the voting threshold might be a little higher. I think it's different to get stuff passed. But I mean, clearly, I think the Bears, obviously, as you know, have till 2033 before their lease runs out at Soldier Field. So they do have a lot of time, but they need to get shovels in the ground well before that. So that is why they're doing this aggressive. They've been doing this aggressive push in Springfield the last couple of years. And it appears, they're getting closer and closer with this mega projects proposal, these mega projects proposals that they want, which would, obviously make it easier for the Bears to negotiate, with the local taxing bodies over property tax assessments with state guardrails. But the key thing about the Bears in Chicago, while Chicago lawmakers certainly want to keep them there, they don't want to give the Bears state money, to build a stadium there. That's one of the big reasons the stadium proposal along the lakefront fizzled, because they wanted, more than $2 billion, maybe $1 billion, $2 billion in incentives from the state to help aid in that move. So that would be a tall order as well. So it's really going to depend on Chicago lawmakers getting on board with helping the Bears if they want to move to Arlington Heights, and that's going to be tough to get them to be on board with them leaving Chicago.
$1 billion here, $1 billion there.
Honestly,
he's about to explode over here because he's so tired of it. But
I appreciate all this insight, and it honestly is helpful because I think it brings more information that I need to know, because my head is spinning hearing all this, but at least it's better than just the runaround conversations we've had for 3 years. But I'm curious, how many branches are on this tree? Because you're talking about tax property, you're talking about putting shovels in the ground, but then what about passing the infrastructure, the streets, the highway, like all this? So how many hurdles do they have to overcome that don't just have to do with putting a shovel in the ground?
Right. So I think so basically this is the thing. The Bears have said on May 16th, when they announced that it was their intention to focus on Arlington Heights, the big thing that I think was a sigh of relief to some state lawmakers, and certainly Governor Pritzker, is that they're not going to look for state funding to do this. Unlike whatever they wanted to do on the lakefront, state funding's out of the question. Now, I think it's pretty safe to assume that if they move to Arlington Heights, they're going to need some state funding, like to your point, like for infrastructure. There's going to be some state funding there. It's probably not going to be too significant, but the state still might have to come and step up and help if that's indeed what they do. But because because they would be moving from Soldier Field, which is overseen by the Park District, to a totally new location, a location where they have owned property for 2 years. They paid $197 million for that property. They still need the local taxing bodies on board with everything before getting shovels to the ground. I mean, there's state law that you're dealing with, which needs to get passed, to allow for some of this, local action to take place between the Bears and the city of Arlington Heights and the surrounding municipalities. So yeah, I'm not I'm not like a lawyer when it comes to this stuff, but it's pretty complicated. But basically, the school districts, the taxing bodies in Arlington Heights really have to kind of get on board with everything as well. So it's not just the state.
You're our lawyer today, Jeremy, and we appreciate it. I just thought it was very interesting that Cam Buckner, who represents the district where Soldier Field is located, was very vocal about they are going to have to go through Chicago. And then I'm sitting there like, hey, I've been saying this forever. If they leave, you have $1 billion hole. What are you going to do with this aging facility? To me, it makes more sense to try to figure out how to make a win-win for the Bears and the city to turn that into not a complete just cash hole that the taxpayers are going to have to eat, but nobody's been willing to think creatively on how to do that. Right. So it's like, to me, then I get to, well, if I'm Indiana, I'm screaming, hey, we're here, so you don't have to deal with any of this, and we'll take your private money and give you a sweetheart of a deal. Come on over here. This was, they've been talking about going to Gary all the way back into the late 80s, early 90s. I don't know where, your nuclear option of what happens here, is there anything that pops to mind?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think that Cam Buckner, it's going to be in his best interest to say what he said, obviously, because as much as he loves the Bears, as much as he would love the Bears to stay in the city of Chicago, he doesn't want to cast a vote for allowing for taxpayer funds to pay for a stadium, especially when somebody like Representative Buckner represents, he represents a district that's pretty diverse. He represents part of the downtown Chicago. He represents part of the South Side, some low-income areas, areas that need tax money for other purposes, and he wants to kind of honor that. So but at the same time, it's kind of like it's a catch-22, I think, for a lot of these lawmakers. They don't want to. State help is what's crucial to keep the Bears in Chicago, and lawmakers don't want to go for that. But at the same time, they don't want them to leave Chicago. So I don't know exactly the nuclear option. I mean, they might have the Bears. I mean, the McCaskies are going to do whatever they want anyway, and they've clearly signaled Arlington Heights. It has been a great possibility. But while all this back and forth has gone on, to your point, you were talking about Northwest Indiana. That's why you saw Rockford in the picture. That's why you saw Waukegan. You saw Naperville. You saw other municipalities saying, hey, we'll help you fund your stadium. But, but the problem with the city of Chicago is they face a budget deficit of their own. And it's in Mayor Johnson, it could be looked at as a political hit if he lets the Bears leave Chicago. But at the same time, how would he be received if taxpayer money, given the the state of the local economy now. How is that going to look if he's, to progressive causes, for him, if he's going to give all this money to a big business like the Chicago Bears, but abandon his other priorities? So I don't know what the nuclear option would be, but it seems like there's just a lot of entanglements here that still need to be resolved.
I'll just throw out my solution, because this state has been so incredibly stupid. I'll say it like that. They sold off the parking. They sold off the tollways. That paid for about 5 seconds of money that they needed. We don't. Anybody in my generation is never going to see that again. It was a 75-year deal on the parking and the tollways that Mayor Daley did way back in the day. People love to blame the mayors of today, but all these problems. This has been rolling downhill for a long time. How they've gotten to this point. Right now, what I would do: sell the land to the Bears, tax the living daylights out of them, try to get some win out of it. And you just have to throw that through. And I don't care what deals have been made before. And I understand the friends of the park will never allow that. Well, people weren't allowed to sell off this before. You have a terrible situation that you can try to make at least slightly better. The Bears have a ton of money. They want to be in Chicago. Sell them the land, tax them, and let them build their damn ass stadium and try to benefit from it. That's what I would do. It'd be better for the city. It'd be better for the state. But nobody wants to get creative like that. And I'm out here, Jeremy, trying to make sense here, but nobody wants to listen. I still think that makes the most sense.